Welcome everyone to the third Open Dial session with the Alliance of British Watch and Clock Makers, and a special welcome to all of our members. Today we are going to be spending time with Lewis and his team at anOrdain. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Adrian and I run the Watch YouTube channel called Bark and Jack. Before we get into it, a special thanks to A Collected Man, who are the sponsor of this episode, and they help us get this stuff done and have this event for you. A Collected Man is everything about watches. They do content, they sell, and they are focused on the rare and interested watches. Interesting. So today, let's get Lewis on and see what he's up to. Lewis, how you doing?
Hello, Adrian. Good. How are you?
Super. I'm very good. I'm very good. Full of spag bowl, so I'm very happy. Lewis, let's have a quick intro into what you do at anOrdain. What is anOrdain?
anOrdain is we're a watchmaking company based in Glasgow, and we've been going since we launched in 2018, but we were a few years before that development. But today we are, I think, 17 people between enameling, watchmaking, design, and other kind of things, but mainly kind of production. So about half the team are in production, and we'll show some of that in the videos today.
Nice lead-in. Yeah, let's check out the first video and see what you guys do.
Hello and welcome to anOrdain. We're in the enameling studio just now, and I'll show you around and talk you through some of the processes. So Nicky is here. Hello Nicky. He's putting red on. So he's applying the enamel in wet form onto a opaque red, which is a post office red, Model 1 dial. And so enameling basically for those of you who don't know, is fusing coloured glass to metal using heat. So so Nicky's putting a layer of powdered glass on at the moment, and once that's applied, he will put it in the kiln. It'll then melt down, and he'll then sand it back so it's smooth, and then he will repeat the process. And every time you do another layer, it gets smoother and flatter and nearer to the finished article. So Cara's over here. She is sanding one of the, is it iron cream? Yeah. So sanding an iron cream, and by hand with diamond paper, and that that kind of brings the. So if I pick one of these up. See, these are pretty lumpy. If you can see, there's fairly lumpy there. So that'll get polished back or sanded back, and then obviously more put on and go into the kiln. Here we've got some of our sort of colours that we use. It shows us just a fantastic range of choices for enameling. There are some of them which are transparent, and some which are opaques, and then these boards here show how one colour would sit on a white background, a white enamel background, then going through gold background, silver background, and flux and things like that. So it shows the different different ways they can come out. And if the enamel powders don't always kind of correlate to the end colour, so it's useful having this board to see what you're going to get once it's all finished. Cara, do you mind putting one of these in the kiln? That's okay, thank you. So this is now the kiln is at 836 degrees centigrade, and Cara's going to put in one of the. So how many layers has that got on?
I think I'm on about my 6th layer of the post office shreds. It's quite a long process to bring up to height. So it's just a wee bit slower process than some of the other enamels. And so we're just going to pop it in the curl. And so time it for 1 minute and 45 seconds.
So that red is quite speckly, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's quite speckly red. So in between layers, after laying the enamel and it's been fired, we're having to drill out some of the specks that are in the dials and then add on another layer, and we just repeat that process until it's up to a certain height before we start sanding it down to bring it down to the proper height that will fit in the watch cases, and then we'll do a final fire to have it to a nice polished finish.
Yeah, and that's one of the big challenges with watch dial enamelling compared to, say, jewelry enamelling, is that the tolerances and the thicknesses that we have to work with are far tighter and a lot thinner than what you do if you were producing jewelry enamel. So these dials are sort of under 1 millimeter, and that it's sort of universally obviously has to be perfectly flat and sort of blemish free. And I think once that'll have 7 or 8 layers on the top, won't it? And then say 1 on the back and the center. So you've got a layer of copper, and in total 8, 9, 10 layers, and all of that has to be perfectly flat. And when you're heating up thin layers of metal to kind of almost 1,000 degrees, then preventing warping is pretty tricky. So that's one of the big challenges that they face doing this.
Yeah, some are more warpy than others,
Yes.
and it's obviously down to how long we have it in the kiln for. So there's a bit of tension between the metal and the enamel itself. That's why we use a counter enamel in the back of it.
Yeah, to stop it. It just yeah. So that was red, wasn't it? Yeah. So the heat's obviously made it black. And can I pick this one up? Is that too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this looks like this is one before it went in. So it's gone from that to that, and you can see it kind of almost like sugar texture on the top of that one, and then it's melted into that. So that one will cool, and we'll show you that in a second. So I was going to show you some projects we're working on now. That's right. So there's a couple of things here. I was going to talk you through. I think one really interesting thing we came across was the fume technique for enamelling, and this style is actually how we discovered it. It's so we were originally, everything we did was in copper, which is sort of the normal way of making watch dials with enamel. And we switched to silver because it had some interesting properties and things you couldn't do with copper. And one of the first dials we did, this is a Model 2 dial, and it reacted differently in the kiln, so it warped in the middle, and you can see there's a lighter area and a darker area to this, where the metal has come closer to the surface, and then when it's been polished back, the top of it is flat, but there's a gradient in colour. So we thought that's a really nice effect, but it was it wasn't centered, and obviously it's warped, so it won't fit in the watch case. So what we did is we designed a dial blank that created this gradient, and here we have one of the finished dials. So this is a very gradual dome in the middle of it, but the difference between the outside and the inside is it's fractions of a millimeter. So it's really really kind of delicate. I'd say some of the early experiments we did with this, and this took a long time, sort of a good year or two to do, because every time we tried one, we had to recut the tool to stamp a new one. And so this was an early one done in copper, and you can see that we've the dome's too high, so we've polished through it and it's gone to the copper there. Say this one was slightly better one, so it's still gone too far, but it's and there's no real gradient there. It's just kind of deep blue and then a bit of exposed copper. And these dials are all actually faulty, or they have some issues with them of some sort. If I hold up some of these, you can see these are kind of the Fubé effects in essentially a kind of their final form. And so you can see there's a nice gradient, and that's I mean the way that's achieved is by using the right kind of enamel. Because obviously, you imagine if it's too dark the enamel, then it won't radiate properly, and if it's too light, it'll just all look very light. So you have to have the right one, and there is maybe 1 or 2/10 of a millimeter difference in thickness of enamel between the center and the outside. So it is really, really fine, and also very, very difficult to produce without cracking. I mean, once they're finished, they're actually very robust, but when you're going through the stages of heating up and cooling down, that's when they're kind of vulnerable to breaking. So that was kind of the way that we'd come across the fumés. And now I think the most exciting project, well, I think for me is the Champlevé project that we've been working on now for almost 3 years. And this was coming in, was going to be our Model 3 watch, and we'd been working on it for a couple of years until I think last summer, where we just kind of it was almost there, but we were having issues, and we decided to take a break from it just to kind of come back to it maybe later in the year. But around that time, Rebecca, who's obviously one half of the Struthers watchmakers, had posted something on Instagram showing a dial which was really similar, and this is quite exciting because Champlevé is not a technique that you see an awful lot of in dial making. Even by enameling standards, it's unusual, and I don't know anyone else doing it at the moment. So to see another British watch company was really interesting, and I'm an enormous fan of the Struthers. They if you don't know them, then you should look them up, because they're doing fantastic things in Birmingham, and we were really excited to kind of to sort of speak to them even, and I had a good chat with Rebecca and Craig, and they were really open with us about how the problems they'd encountered, and we kind of explained the issues that we'd had with all this. And at the end of the conversation, it seemed like we'd been doing things that they hadn't tried, and they'd been doing a lot of stuff that we hadn't thought of, and so we thought, well, if we could bring two sets of heads to the project, it would go better. So we've been working with them for the past year on this dial here, and I can show you. You can see the progressions from dials where you can barely see the numbers coming through them to almost finished. The finished ones are actually down with the Struthers at the moment, but things like these, which are just beautiful, really. They sorry, to explain what Champlevé is for those of you who might not have come across it. Champlevé is when the metal that you're enameling onto comes through the enamel. So these things aren't printed. These are silver numbers that have come through the enamel, and it adds a layer of complexity to the enameling process, because if you imagine on a normal enamel dial, you've got enamel on the front, a layer on the back to counter it, and metal going through the middle. And when you put that in a kiln at 800-900 degrees, the metal and the enamel expand and contract all within a very short time period. And what happens when it does that is it cracks. I mean, the glass is obviously a lot weaker and more fragile than the metal, so it'll crack. And then, so that's one of the main challenges with producing a normal enamel dial. But if you think about the Champlevé, you've got metal on this axis, but also on this axis as well. So it's just complicates things far more. And then you'll have little pockets inside the 6 or the zeros, and these tiny little pools of enamel which are being squished and pulled apart, and just creating something where everything works perfectly and doesn't crack has taken a few years to get to this point. But they really are. They're my favourite of all the dials we've made. So yeah, that's the work we've been doing with Struthers, and it's been one of the high points, I think, for us working with those guys, because they're lovely, but they're also incredibly good at what they do, and it's been a great experience. So this will be coming out for them fairly soon, I think, and our Model 3 will be using the same technique. That's what you'll see when we start prototyping and launch that, which I think will be hopefully early next year. But it will be it'll be in relatively small numbers, because they are difficult to make. And that, I think, is everything for all the projects. Oh, there's some stuff here. Some bits. This is Clossion that the guys were working on when they went off to do a course in the States. On this, and you can see some of the fun things. These are far too thick to be watch dials, but they are bits and pieces. And that's negative Champlevé, which we experimented with, which is obviously just cutting deeper, and then the deeper it is, the darker the color. So instead of raising the numbers up, you're kind of pushing them down. But it's not. The edges look a little bit kind of fuzzy, so we didn't go much further with that. But yeah, that's most of the things that go in this room. And I'll show you next door, which is our second enameling room. We had a flood in here the other day, and the fire brigade had to come and kick the door in. So we've tidied it up some time. Hey guys. So this is our second enameling room. It's a lot of the we took this on during lockdown because we needed social distancing space, but it's actually been very helpful to have as we've grown and got more kilns and machines and things like that. And the kind of the tables are actually metal versions of the wooden furniture we'd had made a few years ago. So we worked the metal work at this time to create these. So they're sort of similar aesthetic. Sally is making fume. Yes, sorry, it took me a while to get that. So she's making a fume dial here, putting the transparent enamel on wet with a paintbrush. So this has been fired once, or
No, that's
this is
ready to go into.
so this has not been fired at all, as Sally's just said, and it's ready to go. So that's you dry that a little bit first. Is that?
Yeah. If you put the wet enamel into the kiln, the rapid heating can just cause the enamels to just blow off.
Yeah. So yeah, that's going in. And Morna is printing. So this machine is a pad printer, and pad printer is actually a very common machine. They make lots of like promotional mugs, pens, sunglasses, things that are printed on unusual surfaces. I.e., it's not paper, I suppose. So pad printing is used a lot, but it's not a machine that many people you come across outside of factories. But it was actually invented in Switzerland for printing watch dials, and this is the kind of standard Swiss machine, this model, which we got a few years ago. It has been. There are very few people in the UK who use a pad printer to this level of detail, or a machine that's capable of printing this kind of much precision and with sort of crisp lines. So it's something that we really kind of taught ourselves how to do, and it took some time and some working out. But it's the guys are brilliant at using it now. And if you that'd be good. So the pad comes and picks up ink from the printing plate, which is there. See, and then the ink sticks to the rubber ball, and then gets dropped down onto this Model 19 cream. We have obviously everything that's a different color is on a different layer. So we use these. Thank you. So this is a model. This is a special Model 2. I'm not sure what that was for, but that's a printing plate for that. And then, so if you're printing, say that's the infill. I think that might have been for the brand one we did. So that would be, say, printed in gold, and then we would have another plate which would do the outlines of it, and that would have, say, black on, and that would go on top of that. And that's inks here, thinners. That's how the pad printer works. Oh, we've got one more station over here. I will show you this. This is where we put the dial feet on. Now, dial feet are, a lot of you will know, but for those who don't, are the two prongs that sit on the underneath of the dial, which I can't see any dials around at the moment, but they sit underneath and they sit into the movement. So and then they're normally squeezed in by little levers that keep the dial attached to the movement. And this is where we apply the feet. And this is a really delicate process, and one that's taken the guys a long time to kind of perfect, because you're applying a lot of heat to the underneath of a finished, completely perfect enamel dial. And what happens is that heat, especially with something like a fume where you've got 0.2 of a millimeter of enamel, the metal expands when you heat it up from the back, and then that expansion, it's very easy to crack the dial. And once you have any kind of crack in an enamel dial, no matter how small it is, that crack will just grow. So those dials obviously are binned. And it can be very frustrating, because it can take several days to make a dial, and once you get to that last stage, once it's been printed and everything's looking perfect, you go and crack it with this. But so it's a very delicate process, and one that they've got very good at doing in recent years. So that's the enameling tool. I will later show you the design room and the watchmaking room.
Lewis, you are a natural at your
That's not what I
delivery there. That was brilliant.
I still haven't watched any of that, so
Oh, you should. It's a masterclass in how to calmly present. But I have to ask, how come you started with enameling? And then, by the way, guys, there's questions. There's a question box coming up on the side of your screen, so you can type in your questions there and have a nice two-way thing going along. But Lewis, why did you start with enameling?
It was just a very easy way of getting into watchmaking. So we thought we'd just knock out a few enamel dials and see how it went. Basically, that was that. No, it wasn't. It was never really about enamel to start with. I think I had this idea that I'd been to Baselworld about 2012, 2013, and was interested in making watches. And when you go over there, you see behind the brands, and there was anyway back then a manufacturing hall, and there were kind of white label people, and they could kind of create watches to your sort of specifications. And what I realized is a lot of the watches were quite similar looking, not because perhaps people wanted them to look similar, but because they're all made with the same process, the same techniques, and by the same factories. And so I thought, well, if you could take production techniques in the UK and adapt them to watchmaking, then you would come out with something which was at least interesting, if not good. And that was really the kind of the idea to start with. And so, I went to sort of belt maker to try and make straps. I went to CNC makers to look at cases. But the person I went to for dials was
a coin mint in Birmingham. In fact, I went to visit two of them. But one of them, because I mean, coins are very similar sizes, they've got details on, and I think there's an Amiga watch once, which was basically a coin, and I thought that looked fantastic. So I think that's where I actually got the idea from them. But so I went down to Birmingham and saw this mint, and one of the coins they had in the display case had an enamel poppy on top of it, and I just thought this thing looked fantastic. So and I was aware that enamel dials existed in watches. And then I started looking into it, and then just the more I got into it, the more I realized how much potential there was in terms of color, and how much I thought we could potentially bring to kind of watches by sort of fusing design that I was interested. Obviously, my background's kind of in architecture, but I'm from one of the local art schools here, and there are, most of the team here are from either Glasgow or Edinburgh art colleges, so there's a sort of a shared aesthetic of how kind of what we're into. And so I thought if you could bring that to watches and bring some of the colors and some of the sort of the vibrancy from jewelry enameling and mix it all together, you get something that's really interesting. So that's how we got into enameling, and it is really difficult. So I think it was something that just keeps you kind of hooked on. The first time we tried it, we got a dial that almost looked sort of 70% there in the first week, and that was amazing. And then it took us about 3 years to get the rest of the way to
wow.
It was actually perfect, but it was frustrating. The years before launch were frustrating, but they were also like very exciting, I think.
So on that point of being frustrating, we've got another question in here. What's your typical production run quantity for your models, and how many dials do you typically discard? So you've mentioned a couple of times around the challenges, so there's obviously a high discard rate.
That's a good question. It's really hard to I think be accurate about that, because every week is different. If we're working on a new process or a new design, that we will have weeks where you're just in kind of mostly in R&D mode, so it's all experimentation and we're not producing. But if we were just in production, I think a good week is about 15 dials that will get through to the watchmaking room, and of those 15 there will be some which may damage, or there might be issues with them during the assembly process or the testing process, so they'll go back. So I think a good week, sort of 10 plus, maybe up to 15. But in the beginning, we had a lot of weeks where we made 1, maybe 2 watches in a week. So it was not a kind of profitable enterprise. It's not something you do for money anyway. But it was quite stressful back then. I think we always had a lot of orders, but actually fulfilling them has been challenging, I'd say.
I can imagine. So we've got another question here. Are there any plans for texture or enamel dials?
Yes, that's not my mum asking that, is it? No, she's not a member, so it won't be her. But no, we have. I think one of the videos we did shows some of the work we're doing on a dial, for a dial that has some of that. But actually, texture is really interesting, because if you look at old sort of traditional enamel, you have kind of engraving underneath the enamel. So you'd have something like a rose engine lathe creating a kind of concentric circles, or you could have hand engraving, and then you have a layer of enamel, transparent enamel on top. And what that does is that when the light reflects off it, it creates lots of different surfaces for the light to bounce off in different ways. So instead of a flat dial underneath where the light will bounce off one way, you've got kind of ridges and all this, so the light will play on it, which is really interesting. And in this, I don't know if it's the next one or the one after, but the video, it shows our kind of take on that. And it was something that we'd be interested in for a long time, but we didn't want to go down the route of sort of using a rose engine lathe, because a lot of people have done that very well, and we wanted to try and bring something new to kind of to the process. So we've done something else, but also if I can just show you, this is a picture of a watch we've just finished. I don't know, this isn't the most professional way of doing it, but this is for the Waco's Revolutions Pink Dial project. So that is a that's a one-off watch we've just made with
Wow.
linen, a solid silver linen dial with a very light coating of pink enamel on top, and in a solid silver case with gold hands that we've made here, and that's really beautiful. So that's kind of something we're playing with, this one-off thing that's going to be launched on Friday, I believe, and I think there's a lot to be digging back into linen dials will be quite fun. So we might be doing more on that after seeing this. This is the design room here. I'm here with Ewan, who's our head engineer and designer.
Bit of a mix of a job. First off, one of the things I do is prototyping. So when it comes to case design, it's fairly CAD heavy, but we 3D print all of our cases before they're produced, which helps to understand scale, how they'll wear, how they look, but a number of things.
It's a massive help compared to having kind of metal prototypes made.
Yeah.
It saves a huge amount of time, and you can tell by
money.
you can tell when you put them on your wrist how it's going to wear. Even if it doesn't look like a watch, it does.
It helps that also helps with understanding assembly as well. So basically, you're making the parts from scratch with CAD already, but you can understand how the pieces all fit together, and you get basically to a finished piece way quicker. And so that's what we do with our cases, all of our designs first. But you can see here, I've got a sort of before and after. So obviously we've got the plastic case, and then this is the next stage, which is the final production sample.
And what is that watch, Ewan?
So this is a new launch. I think it's probably going to be in the next couple of months. This is for a company called the OT Podcast, are they based in Melbourne?
Melbourne, in Australia.
Yeah. It's basically a version of our Model 2. So customers kept on asking if we were going to do a larger version of our Model 2. It's a 36mm currently, and this is a 39.5. So basically sort of just jumping, making the gap a little bit. But yeah, it's designed specifically for them. It's a limited edition run, and it's something that we're pretty close to finished with. But this is still just a sample. Doesn't quite look like this, actually.
But yeah, it's for sort of Felix and Andy are the guys behind the OT, and it's been fun working with them because they've got quite a fun colour scheme for their podcast. So we've got some pinks and greys in there, and this is very similar to our existing Model 2, which I have on, but there are some tweaks, and the hands are the main one. So I'll show you more of that next door. But these are blued hands with loom tips on them. So that was quite a tricky thing to do because it involved looming on top of blued metal. But it looks, I think it's come out really nicely. So yeah, that's I think that's coming out in October, isn't it? So
yeah,
around
I
the same
think
time
so.
as this. Should be.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's sort of the 3D printing side of things.
Yeah. Well, I think on the case design is important. One of the things that we came up against when we started out was because we were working directly with each, with a case manufacturer and with a hand supplier and things, rather than going to a third party, sort of a white label company that you give a design to or a sketch or whatever, and they do everything for you. We had to go directly to the case manufacturer, and I think case assembly was something which did take. It's fairly complex, isn't it?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of pieces to it.
We'll make sure all the gaskets are, obviously fit properly.
There's just a lot of things that can go wrong.
There are. So that's been a really interesting thing about the way that we've approached things. It's taken a lot more time, but when you're making the dials. We need to go down that route, but I think it's given us a much greater understanding of how, what the kind of parameters are for things in terms of design. So it's in the long term, it's been very beneficial. And
I guess while we're on that as well, we're in this room here. You probably can't see, but they've got some 3D printers I was just speaking about. We've also got a laser engraving machine here, which is a new toy. We got it just at the start of the year, but it's making quite a big difference to development. So we've been trying to make some dials with it. I'd love to say trying, pretty successfully making dials with it. but also we engrave the cases for customers' orders. So we have an interesting plugin for our order process, and customers can actually choose to engrave individual maps. So basically just makes their watches unique. And I've got some examples I can show you. So this is basically done just in the box behind me. So essentially we get some really interesting grid structures and water patterns. You can see this one's Italy. And it took a little while to develop the process for that, but customers seem really, really happy with what we're doing at the moment, which is great. And it just means we can do it all ourselves instead of having to outsource an additional step. And yeah, a lot of it happens in this room, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big part of kind of ethos behind what we do is having the design process and the manufacturing in the same place, because it's like with the Fume dial, for example, it was how we came across that was by accidents happening, but everyone being there and seeing it and seeing that actually that something went wrong, but what came out of it was potentially much more interesting than what we were trying to do in the first place. So it's trying to do as much as we can in-house is it's really, really important.
I find it's incredibly valuable as well, just proximity-wise, being so close to the guys next door, the enamelers. I noticed in lockdown when we were working from home, I was having to phone each of the enamelers and ask them specific questions and ask them about dimensions. And some things get a little bit lost, whereas when you work next door to somebody, you can just nip through and you can ask them, you get the answer straight away, and it just helps the process just move way, way more. It's just way more efficient, I think.
Yeah.
It saves us a lot of time.
Let's talk about some of these. These are quite fun. These are so this is the Paula Neo. This is a watch we designed for another Glaswegian watch company. So this is the Neo, and it was a really fun project because it allowed us to do create a piece that had budget was a very big factor. This sells for just under £400, including VAT, doesn't it? Yeah. And so we had to be very clever with the materials but still make something that was interesting and doesn't look like a kind of generic sort of cheap watch.
Something we can show you just now is a first edition, a second edition. We went between two different suppliers making the dials, and you can see the original.
Both in the UK.
Both in the UK. Yep. You can see the original, and this is the current batch that is selling at the moment. In my left hand, and yeah, they all look slightly different. I think they've improved, in my opinion.
I think they look amazing in the flesh. They are. I mean, these dials are aluminium. So aluminium is a very difficult material to work with, as we've found.
Yeah, I think it's especially the anodizing process itself. There's so many things that can go wrong through anodizing. And the final result, when you get it right, is incredible. It's really, really pretty special. But actually getting there is a bit of a struggle.
And do you want to talk about the feet as well? Because that's been a problem which has taken probably a year to fix, isn't it?
So originally when we made the dials, we made them completely flat, and then we added feet after they've been treated. And now what we do is we mill them from a single piece of aluminium. And so what you can see here is the feet are actually integrated into the dial. So they're just milled down.
So you start with a block of aluminium and then cut everything away apart from the feet. So you just that's all that's left sitting up, isn't it? It's the feet.
That's exactly it.
Because you can't solder aluminium and gluing it is not as reliable.
Yeah, it's not very efficient. But this, as it is, when it comes straight out of the machine, it can just snap straight into movement. So it saves us a lot of time. And yeah, it's definitely the way forward.
Yeah. So they're made in the south of England now, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then we take them up here and print them with the power printer next door.
And then assemble them here on site as well.
Yep.
And actually, this is an interesting.
One of Chris's.
Yeah. So this is something we're looking to do with somebody called the dial artist. Essentially, what he does is I think most commonly, he'll take requests from customers. They'll send him their watch and he'll redecorate their dial. So what we're doing with him is we're going to do a limited run where he decorates our dials before we print them. And so we've got like an underlay of his sort of texture or pattern. And I think it's something that could be really, really interesting. We've got a couple more here. You can see the sort of like splattering. This is quite like a, I think people would actually notice this as his work.
Yes, it's very distinct, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's nice. That will be hopefully coming out.
Yeah, I think probably in the next couple of months as well, actually.
Yeah. And we are playing around with the follow-up to the Neo as well, which it's a nice break from doing, I think, having that contrast between anOrdain and doing some kind of work for other companies could be nice.
Yeah.
So this is a project I want to talk to you about as well.
Ease off.
Yeah, the ease off. So there's a company in Linlithgow, which is in the sort of central belt of Scotland, called Method Studios, and they are it's a husband and wife who kind of run it, and the husband is a wood cutter and the wife is an architect, and they make the most beautiful kind of wooden objects. They do a lot of things like kind of trunks, and they do cases for watches and display cases and stuff like that, but really beautiful work. And we were visiting them a couple of years ago, and at the time I was very interested in guilloche dials where you engrave underneath enamel, because what that does is creates kind of uneven surfaces. So whenever the light is shining on the dial, if you move the dial, then the light shines from different parts of it. So there's a lot of kind of playing with the light with those. But the traditional kind of engine turning guilloche was something that other people do fantastically well, and it wasn't really something that we were interested in getting into. So we were in their studio and we saw something similar to this. I think they made it for a whiskey display case or something. And I just had this lovely texture, and it kind of reminded me of like waves and on a lock or something. And it just occurred to me that it would be a very interesting texture put underneath transparent enamel. So we went back a couple months later and then they produced several of these. There's some more sitting around we can show you later, but it's basically just one of the guys that just used a kind of a tool to cut into that.
Each of these is very, very different. You can see for this one, for example, the grooves are slightly longer and slightly deeper, and this was it was really, really interesting, but we thought it maybe wasn't quite right. And then these are more frequent and slightly shallower. And that's basically what we've ended up with.
But we kind of switched between them because I think that probably came out better than or more regular pattern almost. But yeah, and then so what we did then is we wanted to get it scanned, but normal kind of scanners for 3D objects use probes, which wasn't quite suitable, was it?
Yeah, essentially the probe just it's introduced at different points throughout the dial. But if you were going to do that with this, you would have to introduce it at so many different points to actually get the same effect, and it just wasn't really feasible. And so we looked at new technology really to try and record this texture and try not to sort of like cut corners. We wanted to try and recreate this. And then we looked into laser scanning, and we got in touch with some people at Glasgow Uni, and yeah, they helped us to scan the parts. So we could turn them into a dial. So what we did is we scanned the whole piece, and obviously it's not dial size as it is right now. And then we got a file from it. We scaled it down to dial size, and then we made it into a stamp. And then we stamped them out of silver.
Yeah. So had this very nice cycle where it was cut by hand in this workshop in the woods, and then taken to the university where it uses really high-tech scanning equipment, and then obviously put onto a computer and sent down to the guy we work with in Birmingham who cut the die and then stamped it. So it had this nice contrast of very traditional techniques with the stamping and wood cutting, and then the very high-tech kind of laser scanning. And the results of we've been playing around with, and this here is a copper testing blank with no enamel on it there. We've then got another one in silver here, and then once we've started enameling on them, they are coming out like that, which I think is really lovely. We'll be printing on or applying some numerals on top. So that will also be coming out at some point in the future, but it's not too far off. And this is this is the first die we did.
It was originally for a different watch. That was why it's so small.
Yeah, it's smaller, but also the scale. We've kind of we've changed the kind of the scale of it. So these are much deeper, and it looks, obviously it looks like a pitted surface, but it's perfectly flat because the enamel's over it, and it sort of uses the same principles as the Fumé dial, because the deeper bits have deeper color. So it's a lovely dial. Well, these are some of Chris's, but they're a nice thing to finish on. I think. Some of the
don't fall off the edge.
Yes. Some of the dial arts prototypes he sent over, which we'll then print numerals on. Yeah. But yeah, that's I think that's it from the design room, and later on we will show you the watchmaking room.
So smooth. So Lewis, we've got so many questions coming in here. Let's get through straight to some of the questions. How do you go about choosing your colours for your watches? The enamels, the inks, and the combinations.
It's actually all of that area is done by the enamelers, which I think is nice. I think we'd like the colours, the colour combinations with. So once you've got the enamels, there's, as you saw in one of the videos, we've got a big wall of enamels that we've kind of put testers up of, and there are a lot more that we sort of discovered as well. And so when it comes to matching them with printing inks, that's actually almost always led by the enamelers, because they've got kind of good eyes for this, and so they're very familiar with what kind of works with what. So they normally come up with tests. So we'll get a plate cut for the printing, and then they'll play around with that, and we'll sort of sit down and look at the different options. But they normally kind of choose different color combinations, and they tend to work really well, I think. So that's how it's done.
And on color combinations, you mentioned solid silver cases. What about a gold case?
Yes, that would be nice, wouldn't it? It would. I mean, it's possible. The company that we work with for the silver cases is an Italian firm who just do precious metal cases. So we've kind of got the options to make one, but I just feel at the moment with the price of gold is so high that the watch would be a lot higher than anything that we've made before. Not to say we wouldn't do one, but it's not something we've done. We thought we'd go for silver first, just to see how we got on with that, and then perhaps gold after that. But it's something. I mean, I would be keen to do it personally, but so perhaps in the future.
And how do dials age over time? Do the colours of vibrancy change or largely remain the same?
They don't, which is nice. It's enamel's rather like stained glass, and if you think of kind of a cathedral that's 1,000 years old and it's got a stained glass window that's been in the sun for the past 1,000 years, and it's still got that those rich colours. It's like a dial. I mean, it's going to look the same long after you've gone. So it's one of the appeals, I think, is you are kind of creating something that will last as long as it's looked after. So
cool. I didn't know that. That's brilliant. And you did a collaboration with Paulin, which is a Scottish company. You've done quite a few collaborations recently. Is there anything that you can share coming up?
I think collaborations are quite a popular thing at the moment. More they have been, and probably will continue to be. But no, the Paulin thing was great because it gave us a really tight budget. So the watch I think sells for just under £400 including VAT, and I really want to capture the sort of the essence. Look, what kind of appeals to I think you or I about mechanical watch,
and that you don't get from a watch maybe at that price. So it's more of a fashion watch. And I think, and you know, it's like why people into vintage watches, they have this sort of character, and I just want to get that across and into the hands of people who are in that, you know, shopping in that area and kind of pulling customers. And so it was a really interesting and kind of constraining brief, but that made it a lot more fun to work with. So yeah, I really enjoyed that project, and we're going to do something else with them, I think, next year that we've been working on.
Brilliant.
And it's a nice break to get away from like what we do every day to sort of a busman's holiday, I suppose, for
sure.
the watches. But yeah, there's a few other things we've been working on as well. I think the OT is a podcast I've listened to since the beginning, and those guys you've been on it a few times, haven't you? You're a regular.
Yeah, really good fun. Love the podcast. I'm
not sure. I think we kind of might get told off for this, actually, because I presume this would have been out by the time this thing came out, because we've been working on it for over a year, and so I think Felix and Andy might send me some angry messages later if they see this, but they're probably not members, so it's fine. But it will be coming out in a couple of weeks. So it's a very cool watch, and it's our first iteration of the new Model 2, and we thought we'd do something with them to kick it off. And yeah, it's sort of tied in. It's very much the aesthetics that they were kind of that go along with what they've been doing. And it's the new hands for that are really cool, because we've taken, kind of developed the old Model 2 hands, and we've, from, I think they were silver with lume tips, but now we're bluing them ourselves and then painting and getting them sent off to Switzerland, as we did before, to get the lume painted on, because it's this incredibly fine line. But they're blued hands with lume, which I think is quite an unusual combination, because it's sort of field watch and dress watch kind of, it's an old combination, but it kind of works well, and it's I think the pieces look really nice, so I'm excited for that to come out. Yeah.
Cool. Can't wait to see it. So we've had loads of questions coming in. We are definitely going to overrun. But guys, please stay around, because we're probably going to go until about 8:15. But keep asking your questions. We'll do a quick fire round at the end if Lewis is up for it. But we're going to jump into the next video, which is going to be with the watchmaking.
Cool. Welcome to the watchmaking room here at anOrdain. Here we've got Chris, who's our head watchmaker, and he's regulating a Model 1 at the moment. Regulating, for those of you who don't know, is adjusting the movement to make sure it keeps the most accurate time possible. So one of the things we do when a customer orders a watch is to have a chat with them about how they're going to wear the watch. I think the main thing is which wrist it's going to go on, but also things about, is it going to be face up at night or is it going to be face down? So if you can sort of work out which, how the watch is going to be worn and how it's going to be kept, you can know which of the different positions are the most important to regulate for. And so that's what we do with all the watches before they go out. That's what Chris is doing just now. Ewan here is assembling a Model 1, yes. Ewan joined us a year and a half or 2 years ago, a year and a half, about that? Yeah. And so Ewan apprenticed with us from that. He's got a background in engineering and had been working on clocks in his spare time. So he was a keen horologist, and before he joined us, and he's doing very, very well. And this is so Ewan's doing this, and here we have Nice, who's a watchmaker with a background in mathematics, so a degree in maths, and then you went to do the WASTEP course in Manchester, where you came top of your class. Yes. Yeah. And actually, we came across Nice through the Struthers. Again, they were incredibly helpful with putting us in touch. And I talked to the guys at the watchmaking school, and they said Nice was fantastic. And so I'm just saying that because she's here. No, they said she's very good. And so I asked her to bring in her watch, just because she's actually graduating today. Which then she made this watch, which I thought would be nice to show. and it's lovely. So yeah, so nice since she joined us in January. She has been working on a module, a moon phase module, and actually more than one module, but moon phase is the main one.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes. So basically, I'm taking caliber already existing. So for that one, it's a 6498, which is quite classic, and I'm adding complication onto it. And the one I'm doing now, it's a moon phase, so it's just to indicate the phases of the moon.
Yeah, and I actually hadn't seen that book before, but the notebook, or I can see the maths degree must have helped an awful lot in that, because I have no idea.
Yeah, so that was during the prototyping stage, where I've put all the drawings and notes, calculations, and now the prototyping phase is done, and I'm going to do the manufacturing soon.
So from there it went on to SolidWorks, didn't it?
Yeah.
Or CAD?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've done all the CAD drawings.
Yeah, so you can
on
see
my computer.
it working as a module in 3D. So that's that's now on gone to CAD, and it all, and we've got the lathe next door, which is getting set up at the moment. It's had that's the Shablin 70, so that'll be quite soon. Yeah,
and then making the parts.
Yeah. So that's really, I think, a really exciting thing for us is we're getting into the watch, more of the watchmaking aspect. We started with dials, and I think making modules is a really interesting first step. And I think the idea is we'd be making about 50 in the first batch, hopefully.
Yeah. We need to
see how it goes. It's a little way off, but it's we're kind of starting out.
Yeah, that would be ambitious, but hopefully.
Yeah, and. I think it is very tricky to. I think we found the starting point quite hard, because if you don't have nice didn't have anyone to teach you, did you? So we've had some help from some watchmakers in the UK, and even actually Roger Smith said he'd help if we had. So he was very supportive of us getting started, and that's been brilliant. So we're watch this space. Yeah. Now we have Erland, who is not a watchmaker. If you get in touch with the company, you'll probably have talked to Erland, and he's the person that makes everything run smoothly and deals with everything. So an invaluable part. This isn't watchmaking or enameling, but this is obviously leather. The straps and the cases that we have are all made in Germany, and the way we work is we source leather. So this is Pingrain kid skin, and we'll take in skins and hides and check them, and then the ones we like we'll send off to Germany, and they'll come back in the cases, so or in the form of straps. So here, so I thought I'd show you some watches. These watches these are Model 1s. I think they're the current iteration of Model 1s. And this is a lovely tray that the Method Studios that I mentioned earlier made for us and for our display case in the MoMA in New York, which is they'd be really popular there. So yeah, those are the Model 1s. This one here is one of the limited editions we did recently. It was only a limited edition because we had 30 cases left from the original Model 2, and we'd made this Grand Feu, which I think everyone was very taken with, so we thought we'd do a run out in that. And yeah, this is one of our, when you buy a watch, they come in these double travel cases, which are nice and useful. That's a goatskin one, it's Italian green leather, and that sort of suede. The last thing in here I was going to show you was some of our hands. Hands are a really interesting one, because we started off with getting the hands made in Switzerland completely, and they were, what were the first hands? Skeleton hands, the polished skeleton hands that we designed, and we designed the hands every time we do a watch. We do typeface and the dial design, and the hands are an extension of that. So that you know, the 12 numbers which are on there, and the 3 hands, and it's part of the same process. Which it's not a case of here's a dial and let's choose some hands that go with it. It's always a very kind of holistic thing. And so we'd gone from working with a Swiss company to make the hands to bringing them more in-house. We still get the blanks done in Switzerland, so the blanks are stamped out, and but we blue them here and we stake them. So we put them on the tubes, and they're kind of pressed onto the tubes. These are these hands here are for the new Model 2, and these are, I think, particularly lovely hands. I'm biased, but I think that the Model 2 hands initially were, because it's a kind of an outdoorsy watch and you know, traditionally you'd have loom on the hands. We designed the hands so they're almost like a hand holding a pen. Actually, I don't know what this pen. So the loom tip was here and the hand was this kind of, so it was that form. And this is a sort of development of that. So we've gone from having polished silver hands with loom tips to having heat blued hands with loom tips, which is, I think, unusual. I don't think I've seen it before. And it does present another layer of complexity, because you have to, with heat bluing hands, there's a lot of hand polishing involved. So the better the polishing, the better the finish will be. And so if you blue them and you scratch them, or you make a mistake, or the colour's not quite right, you can start them again. But once they've got loom on there, obviously you can't heat them up again, or you'll burn the loom. So we've had to finish the hands, and then the looming gets done in Switzerland. So if you look at these, the level of incredibly detailed looming. So they're all done under microscopes by one company in Switzerland who just specialise in doing this. So they loom the tip on there, and then they get sent back, and we stake them here and assemble them. So these hands haven't come out yet. They're coming on the next Model 2 iteration, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting that watch out. So I think they're really nice. And I think that's everything from here. So thank you very much.
I need to get some presentation skills from you, Lewis. It's brilliant. I love that little pocket watch as well. Of course, I love your watches, but
yeah, I like that one too. I was saying to Nice before, bring that watch in with you. We're going to film tomorrow.
Gorgeous. Yeah, you have to do. There's the next collab. So we've got loads of questions. We're going to blast them. Guys, thanks for hanging around. As we've got another few minutes to go, and so we're just going to go through some questions here. Were you considering cloisonné at some point? I hope I pronounced that right.
Yes, we will. So cloisonné is, I'm sure a lot of people know, it's where you put little wires in to divide the enamel, and you can kind of do different colours. One of the enamels, Morna, is very keen on cloisonné, and she's done bits of that for fun. It's not something we've looked at yet, but for kind of release. But we've I think Champlavé is what we're sort of really interested in at the moment, which is where you cut kind of pulls away, and so it's I wouldn't say it's similar to the two are similar, but they are kind of similar, and that's sort of the road we're going down at the moment. But it's definitely something we'll do in the future.
Cool. Do you think you will do other models with more complications in the future?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's I think one of the challenges with enamel is that the dials are, at least twice as thick as the standard watch dial.
Right.
So, but normally kind of a bit more than that. So the movements a standard movement won't fit an enamel dial. And especially with subdials and things like that, it can be a lot more challenging. So it's something we have been working on for quite a while, and something you will see those kind of complications coming out.
Do you have a favorite complication that you'd like to see?
Well, actually, I think that video just covered the moon phase, didn't it? Probably, which is what Nice has been cooking up. So that will be very cool to see. And yeah, it'd be lovely to have her sort of designing and making that in house. I think it's a big step for us. So that'll be cool. And then we've also got some really interesting ideas for the dial with that, and to tie in with the way she's making movements. So I think that'll be the first, the first kind of complication we do anyway will be that moon phase.
Brilliant. Got a great question here that is, enamel is usually reserved for high watchmaking. Has anOrdain's affordable price point affected your work so far? Or how has it affected
that's a really good question. I should explain the reason that we are affordable is because we spent several years and an awful lot of money on kind of developing those skills in-house. So and we've got 17 people here, and we make 10, maybe 15 watches a week. So it's because we're in Glasgow and we're not in Switzerland. There's obviously different costs of the cost of living here, and we're not buying in things so much. We're not buying the expensive parts of the watches from other people. We're kind of everything's here, so it's materials and labor when you get down to it. So we're able to do it for that reason. But I think the challenges it's brought is that demand has always outstripped what we can produce. So this recently we changed to batch production from kind of making to order, and I hope that's going to be a much better way of for the customers to sort of and also for us to kind of to allocate some time for development, so we're not always kind of manufacturing. But it's it's certainly been an interesting one. I mean, they are probably really quite underpriced, I think. And if you look at the margins other people put on watches, I think we did. Yeah, we have done that, but at the same time, we're always busy, and we kind of enjoy what we do. So it's an interesting one. That question.
Yeah, it must be tricky trying to figure out the balance between, do we spend money on the exploring where we're going to go next, or do we focus our workforce on the money making side to make up for the money that you've already spent? So it must be such a tricky thing to balance.
It's a real balance. I mean, you've kind of got to be doing both, especially when you've not got enormous margins. It's a case of just getting that balance right. But we were very lucky in that we've always got orders, so we can kind of and again, I mean, we don't spend any money advertising or marketing. We've never done any of that. So I mean, it's nice. I mean, if you make something that people really want, then people will talk about it, and then people will buy it. So when we've got that advantage, I think, in being able to put a lot into the product, and that's and so that's been really good.
That's brilliant. When's your first batch going to be released?
Good question. The first batch is we're going to do batches on the 1st of every month. So that's going to be everything we produce in a month will go on sale on the 1st of the next month. And we think it's going to be, I think the fairest time we thought was 2 p.m. UK time, because that kind of spans the world just about. But yeah, so the 1st of November will be our first batch, which will be fairly small because we've still been catching up with orders at the beginning of this month. But we should have about 25 watches then. And then the month after, hopefully we'll have a few more. So
that's a great idea. Got a couple of questions about learning around watchmaking. Where did your watchmakers study watchmaking? I'm 16, and my dream is to become a watchmaker. But I don't know where to study.
Well,
that's really cool.
If they're in the UK, there are 2 places to study. There's Manchester and Birmingham. There's a WASDEP course in Manchester. There might even be one in London, I think, but definitely one in Manchester. And there's a university course in Birmingham, I think, but we've not had anyone from that, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, our watchmakers are a real variety. Chris, who's our first, he's our kind of head watchmaker, he learned through the BHI, so the British Horological Institute, and he did a lot of distance learning, and then went down to, I think it's north of England somewhere, for exams. And he's fantastic, really kind of meticulous and thorough and knows his stuff. So it's that he's obviously come out with that very well. Ewan has always had an interest in clocks, so he's sort of apprenticed. He apprenticed about 2 years ago, and so he's learning on the job. And then Caroline studied in Switzerland at a sort of technical college, so she was living in Switzerland, and studied as I presume it's sort of like an HND or something, and nice, as I probably mentioned in the videos, is WASTEP trained in Manchester with a master's degree beforehand. So they've all come from different angles, but they all managed to do the job. So there's different ways of doing it.
Happen.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. Lewis, thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for doing this event. Thanks to everyone for asking a question, for obviously watching, but also getting involved and asking questions. Big thanks to A Collected Man for sponsoring these events, because this is how this all stuff happens. And we'll see you at Open Dial number 4.